Yo, yo, yo. Keith Ferrante here with my lovely wife.
Hi, Heather Bronte. Good to be with you all today.
Figured we would chat about some family dynamics. We have been married how many years now? 27 years.
27 years. Yep.
Whoa. Married after a year of dating in Bible college in Springfield, Missouri. And I remember back then me having to go through a vetting process with you because you you had a particular set of values that you were looking for in a man. Why was finding the right person to be married to such an important deal to you?
I think because my family growing up, we had a lot of interesting dynamics to it. And just even thinking about the word family, I know that can be a very triggering word for people. And honestly, it kind of was for me, like back then as well. And so I wanted I wanted to have a different, I wanted my family, my legacy to be a little bit different than the way that I was raised. And I was brought up in church. My mom took us kids to church. I'm the oldest of four kids. And my dad wasn't in that picture. I mean, he was home, he was in the picture in my life, but he didn't know the Lord. He was amazing in so many ways, and he was a character in so many ways, and I absolutely love my dad. However, I wanted something different. For marriage, for family, I just wanted something different. And oftentimes, I know that you hear the statement so many times, I've heard it through my life, is change your story and you'll change your life. And that's so important because you can go through your journey in your life one way, and maybe there's several of you in the same family, and one chooses to go one direction and then another chooses to go a different direction. And people can look at one direction and think, oh, why is your life so different than this person? Well, oftentimes we have a choice. We have a choice in whether or not we can shift the course of our history. And so I think that's for me, like what I wanted. And so when we were dating, like I started seeing similar things that I didn't necessarily want in a relationship in the way that he was behaving. I mean, granted, we were early 20s at the time, and it was a little bit of a set off for me. Like it kind of triggered me, honestly. And so I think that's one of the reasons.
I think was 21 when I first met you, and then
Yeah.
we were married at the end 22, October 4th. Yeah, I had some immaturities, and we always say when we work with marriages and we work with people that there's four seasons. There's season one, life just happening to you. That was what you didn't want to see reproduced. You didn't want to see some of the life that had happened to you reproduced. You wanted a different life. Well, the second season is then you getting healed from the first season. And if you don't get healed from the first season, you bring that into the third season, which is all about your destiny and your purpose and what you're supposed to do in life. And then your fourth season is your legacy. And so I remember the Lord showing you, dear, that you met this one lady, this hardened, bitter lady, maybe 5 years after we've been married. And then the Lord was talking to you about how you would have had a similar journey to her had you not gotten some inner healing yourself.
Yeah, I was out one day and I ran into this lady, and she was one of the most negative, just bitter women that I had ever encountered. And I just heard the Holy Spirit speak to me and say, had you not chosen to go through inner healing in your life, you would have turned out just like her. And it was so shocking to me. I was like, wow. And it just made me realize that if we don't choose to deal with the things that, we walk through in life, we all have interesting situations happen to us and things that we encounter, experiences, like we have different experiences, and just really feel like there are those moments where we have to, you don't want to like do a deep inner dive all the time and go introspective on yourself, but you do need to walk with the Lord. If you're walking with the Lord, walk with the Lord and ask Him to show you the different areas that you actually need to deal with and you need to work on, because if you don't deal with it, then you're going to bring that into whatever relationship. It's not even about just marriage. It's about friendship. It's about other family members. It's about people that you work with, your coworkers, your peers, just different people that we have relationships with. So it's not just about marriage. It's really about getting inner healing and dealing with those things. And oftentimes I found that it's usually dealing with the lies that we choose to believe about ourselves, and then letting God shine his truth on it, shine his light and expose the truth that we really need to start to believe so that we can embrace who God's made us to be.
Yeah, I mean, we had different upbringings. You grew up in a pastor's home, and then you grew up in a turbulent situation at home. And I mean, mine wasn't perfect either, but I remember you thinking that mine was way different when we first married. You thought you're called it a Beaver Cleaver family, which is this nice little family
Leave it to
show.
Beaver, yeah.
Leave it to Beaver. But it was like, once we got in the journey, I also needed healing from my family dynamics and upbringing as well. And sometimes it's not just your parents. It's like, for me, it was the church environment, the denomination, the upbringing, just maybe even the cities we lived in, some of the experiences around it. But that was the Lord brought some spiritual fathers and mothers into our life in our mid-20s, maybe a year or two after we were married. And that was our biggest desire. It's like we wanted to be fathered and mothered. So we were crying out for family dynamics. We were crying out for input, for people speaking in life, and God brought us those. And then there was I began to get a revelation that my parents and my family and my upbringing, they did as best as they could, but I needed an upgraded view of the Father as well in my own life. So even though our journeys look very different, we both needed the Lord to kind of step into those journeys and help us. And now we're 27 years married into the journey. Our kids are grown up, and daughter's now married, and it's like most of what we do when we get into the nations or with business people or political people is we end up talking about their families. We end up getting into their families and their relationships. And what do you see in that, dear? Why the Lord has brought us into those sort of scenarios?
Well, I think when you're walking with just people in general, like just leaders, and we've been in a lot of leadership type of situations and working with people. And what we notice is that when you have those connections and you have those dynamics, oftentimes oftentimes there's a dynamic where it's just a really highly intense environment. And there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of just situations that are happening, a lot of activity, a lot of flurry going around, a lot of swirl. We can call it swirl. It could be good swirl. It could be bad swirl. But there's a lot of swirl. And oftentimes people don't prioritize. They're maybe prioritizing their business, or they're prioritizing other things, and the family kind of ends up being on the back burner. Or maybe their marriage ends up being on the back burner. It's like maybe the husband's driven, or maybe the wife's driven, and they're just go, 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 go. And then maybe they'll get to sit down and have dinner together sometime. Maybe they'll go out to dinner. Maybe they'll plan intentional date nights. Maybe, but oftentimes not. And so I think working together and just encouraging people to prioritize this. If you're married, prioritize this relationship. If you have children, make sure that you're connecting with them, you're spending quality time with them, you're doing things that just really engage their heart and what their needs are, because we all have different needs, right? We all have different desires, we all have different wants, we have different needs, and paying attention oftentimes gets put behind whenever you're in a high intense work environment relationship.
We definitely noticed that a lot of times the priority is not. Many people may have God. They may really legitimately have God first. They may be in the government arena or the business arena and prioritizing God. But then the family dynamics is definitely, they kind of mix in God and purpose as more important than the family.
Well, and I think it goes back to what you were just saying about how um, how our environment plays a part in how we're raised, right? It's not just about family dynamics. It's about, maybe you were raised in a city and I was raised in a really tiny small town. And there are just different practical dynamics that go along with that. So some people are going to have, even financially, like some people are going to have more access to things because maybe they came from a more affluent family. And then sometimes, that's not the case. So I think those dynamics play into relationships and how people interact with one another and how you grow together and learn together and deal with things together.
I remember that we too did not prioritize our marriage and family. I know you had that passion for a healthy family dynamic. I had also a passion for marrying the right person. We both had a standard on who we were going to marry. We wanted that person to be virgin. We wanted them to love the Lord with all their heart. We had some standards. We had good standards, but when we got into marriage, so we found those standards in each other, and we were married after a year, but we had favor early on to start traveling. We were traveling to the nations, but we had started having some spiritual fathers in our life and mothers, and they started talking about how our priorities were off, and we were prioritizing the mission of the nations and the preaching and the opportunities that were there for us, but we too didn't yet understand, because it's almost like a subconscious. It's like you don't even realize it. You do love the Lord, but you're not putting each other first. So you're like starting to pursue all this favor and all this opportunity in our marriage, and then our young kids, and then even our church, our leaders. Those relationships needed work, and so it took a while for us to get it. That was our first 10 years of marriage, was the mentors helping us recognize that the priorities needed to be more on us in the Lord over the travels. That travels had to be secondary.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons that we've learned in our journey together is that global reform starts at home. And that has been one of the values that have really become a core value for us and a priority for us, is that, you can go out and be doing all of these missions and all of these great things all around the world, but if your family is falling apart and your marriage is falling apart and your relationship with your kids doesn't exist, then it's time to step a little bit backwards and reevaluate, reassess, and reprioritize, because there's just nothing in the world that's worth losing your family, your peace, anything. That it's just not worth it. And so we had been in that season of favor, and we were traveling and we were going to the nations, and I went to Brazil for 6-7 weeks without Keith and the kids whenever they were 4 and 6. And that was a really trying time for us, because, I had known that I had a calling on my life just as much as Keith did. And I wanted to pursue the things that God had in for me, you know what I mean? As a woman in ministry, what does that look like and how can I pursue that? And so here I'm thinking, I'm running after the dreams of my heart, but yet didn't think about the whole entire picture, with Keith being home with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. And, we were senior pastoring at church at the time, strong hormones, all the things, right?
Let's be honest.
Yeah. And so there was just a lot that we had to deal with and get through to the other side of, even whenever I was doing something that I knew that I was called to. But that's, I think, when we learned also the power of timing and the importance of timing, and why, maybe whenever your kids are really tiny, traveling the world and going out and doing all of that. I'm not saying that it's a no, not ever. I'm just saying that you have to really know and be in agreement of what that is, and truly be in agreement, because he was saying yes, 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 go, 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 and the mentors were saying go, 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 but underneath he didn't have a real true yes, because he was saying yes because he cared about my heart and he cared about the dreams of my heart. But yet, it was this.
Yeah, and you know what? You're in a culture where hey, everyone following their passion and their destiny is a huge priority in our world. male, female, everybody. It's like, go after your dream 100%. But we learned, yeah, it's like, yes, go after your dreams, but you have to prioritize how, if your foundations and your marriage and your relationships can handle it. Like you were saying earlier, it's not just always marriage, and sometimes it's like the friendships.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was the season where I was really struggling, and it was like the Lord was like, you need some friends. That's where your missing relational gap is. And so like for us, I think this whole just introduction conversation around relationships is more about what is the relational dynamics you need in your life to have a rich whole. It's like you need spiritual parents, you need friends, you need, if you're married, unless you have the gift of celibacy, like scripture says, you need a great spouse, like your kids, like what's the rich environment you need around you? Because a lot of people are like, who's your covering? Who's your covering? But I look at this as your covering. A healthy marriage is a covering, because it's what is covering? Love. Love is your covering. It's a protection. So a lot of times people are like, who's covering you? And they're talking about, well, yeah, this organization is covering me. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's really covering. It could be if they actually knew you, but a healthy marriage is a cover. It's a protection. Friendships, mentoring, like you need that. So for us, it's like, okay, pursue destiny, but what is destiny? It's a battle. It's a battle. And so if you're left uncovered, if you're left vulnerable, because some relations, maybe some area in your life, you're not being vulnerable. You're not being vulnerable about. Maybe you're being tempted. Maybe you're being tested in. You don't have people to process that. Then the enemy is going to get in there. And so we've seen a lot of marriages, and we can see it. We can see it with world political leaders, and they're doing a great cause. They're doing a great thing, and then you can hear just even in their language, yeah, my wife is saying I shouldn't be traveling so much. It's affecting the kids. And you're immediately like, yeah, the language starts revealing. If you don't listen to that, that is a covering conversation. Your spouse is trying to say, hey, we're not protected here. And then what happens? The enemy begins to jump through that loophole. And it's like, you're out doing the world. Your wife is at home, or whoever, maybe it's the opposite way. The husband is at home and the wife's out. And it's like, the enemy is getting in that loophole and starting to create a little divide. And so I think it's just learning, like how to prioritize the family. And how are you going to have a healthy marriage if you have wounds from bad relational dynamics? So you have to go back and get the healing, which we just talked about briefly. Get healing from the family dynamics that create how you relate relationally right now. And, Heather and I get into a lot of situations where it's like, people are just used to one person being in that situation, not the marriage, not the family, not together going in. They're either bringing me in as a advisor or prophetic voice, or or her for something else. It's like, and we come in together oftentimes, and people realize, oh wow, we really need this. We need this model and this dynamic. There's such a richness here.
Yeah, I think too, like we even are in our journeys for many years, we were in the same area, maybe the same ministry area, but yet we had very different lanes and different tracks in what we were doing in the ministry. And so, I was very involved in worship and children's ministry and just different dynamics. And then Keith, he was in the streams that he was in. And, oftentimes our worlds didn't necessarily cross even in ministry. However, our hearts were together and we were for one another. And we were, it was like you're holding hands, and, there are seasons where he's thrusting me forward and then seasons where I'm thrusting him forward, but we're still together. And I think oftentimes a lot of people are like, oh, well, you just go do your thing and I'm going to do my thing, or you do your thing and I'm going to do my thing. And it's like, it's fine if there's agreement in that, but oftentimes we're finding that dealing with marriages and relationships, that there's not a lot of togetherness. And I think that's really God's heart, is to be together. Whether you're together, physically together and doing something, or you're together in spirit. I think it's just so important that your hearts are connected, because if the disconnection is there, how many of you guys know, like, you guys get into an argument with a spouse or a friend or a son or daughter or whoever, and you know there's a disconnection, and you have to work intentionally on connecting your hearts, connecting to one another, because if you don't, then it's just not going to be a good day for anybody. So I think that's just one of the things that we really try to focus on, is making sure that, working with marriages, like, that our hearts are connected. And we work on that with one another. There are days that, he's feeling completely disconnected, and maybe I said something that hurts his heart, and he's like, ouch. And I'm like, sorry.
It's constant work to have a good marriage. You have to communicate your needs. You have to be real. You have to not try to act like you're invincible. We both are strong, but we both get hurt. And we talk, you have to talk through those. Sometimes you don't get those things fixed right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a while to kind of work through them and learn to protect each other's hearts in those areas. But it's such a beautiful gift. And I was just thanking the Lord this morning. I was just thank you, Lord, so much for the gift of my wife, and just, what a treasure that is. I'm around a number of people that are either in struggling marriages, or they're not married, or they still want to be married, and they're getting up there in years. And I'm like, it's such a gift. And so if you're married, just treasure your spouse, work on that relationship. And like Heather said, you don't always have to do everything together, but your heart has to be together. It's fun when we're, like she was in the hair industry. It's like, I'm not doing that with her, but our hearts are in it together. We're walking together as she's doing that and I'm doing my thing. But we're making sure that we're connected in that journey. And so we just wanted to get a little conversation started about family and just the importance of family. And we just pray wherever you're at that you would really prioritize your family. And if you've had some mistakes in how you've been around family and how you responded in family, just give yourself grace, and give yourself grace where you currently are at. If you've made mistakes, maybe you've been divorced, maybe you're separated, just start now. Don't beat yourself up. And hey, we would love it if you have any questions about family and this conversation, because we really want to spend more time in this, and we're going to be having more time where we're bringing our different family members in and having conversations. Is there anything that you would like to know about family dynamics, or any insights that we could process with you? We'd love to help you get some breakthrough. This is our huge passion of ours. We've helped many people in this area from all different phases in life, and we're super passionate for people to have a healthy family. I think this is God's heart in this just era that we're living in. This is the most important subject and the most fought after subject. The enemy's trying to fight to disrupt family, but this is where the greatest treasure is in the Lord. So
I think too, I just want to challenge you this week to go out there and do something fun with your family. Whether it be your spouse or your kids, or just make it a point to connect with them. Go out, go grab ice cream, or go to a movie, or even just plan a fun date night at home. It doesn't have to be something super expensive. It's just connect with our heart, connect with something that they want to do, not necessarily what we want to do, but maybe what they want to do, and find out what it is. The other night, we had just been in London for a week, and prior to that, we were in Washington, D.C. for a week, and so we've been gone, and we got home, and my son said, I had already showered, and I was in my PJs, and he said, hey, Mom, do you want to run and go get In-N-Out with me? And I was like, ugh, I don't really want to go get In-N-Out right now, but you know what? I'm going to choose to connect. We were so tired. We had just traveled all the way across the pond, so to speak, and so he was like, will you go with me? And I was like, you know what? This is a time to connect. So anyway, we went and we got In-N-Out, and then we came home and ate it together and just had a little special time. And it was really, really sweet. So I'm just really glad that, you have those moments. So don't miss out on those moments. The little ones where they're saying, hey, I'm for your 22-year-old son to say, hey, Mom, will you go get a burger with me? Yes.
Good job, love.
Yes,
he asked me to, and I told him I was going to bed. So Heather passed on that test, but I got in the hot tub with them the next day.
That's right, and I did not.
I did it because I said, I know if I'm in that super tired place, it could actually hurt the relationship
Which
if
is
I don't
true
get
as
some
well.
rest. So
Yeah.
it was wisdom for me to go to bed and let Heather have that conversation
Yeah.
and
And we
hang
had
out
a
with
great
Micah.
time. So
So we love family dynamics, and we love that God has created the family, and we just bless you guys. And you know, there's a beautiful spiritual family out there for every one of us, and there's so many rich dynamics, and we're so excited to go on this journey. Send us your questions. Love to chat more with you about this. God bless you guys.